What's up everyone? Today we're painting the Brute from Gloomhaven. I went a little off script because the artwork from the game makes him pretty much exclusively this peach tan color, and instead of doing that I used my own color scheme for him to make the furs that he has on him a little bit brighter, the leather brighter, the shield a different color, and that way made him overall a more interesting miniature to look at. But he was a lot of fun to paint, and if you're interested in seeing more Gloomhaven painting videos, then click subscribe down below, and don't forget to like the video if you like it. But without further ado, let's get down to the table and I'll show you how I painted him. Alright, we're starting with a Zenithal highlight as usual. Black with white over top from the top down. Alright, and our very first color we're going to use is a brand new one. We're using Walnut from Scale 75. And we made it into a wash using a lot of water. And I did about 2 or 3 layers of that before we got started. The first color on the fur here is P3 Umbral Umber. That's one that I normally use. It's that real dark chocolate brown color. And I'm painting that really into like a V right in this section here. We're going to make this a bear sort of fur. Next up, we're mixing P3 with flat brown. And then that is going to overlap slightly with the P3 and also have a bit of its own section. So just sort of fatten out this triangle here with a P3 flat brown mixture. Then we follow that up with pure flat brown. And just trying to make like a gradient here. So I know that fur doesn't 100% look like this, but I think that this artistically looks like fur, and it gives you that fur feel when you're looking at it. This is flat brown and khaki mixed together. And same exact thing, you want to make sure that the paint is thin enough that it goes on, but you want it to stay thick enough that it stays wet so that you can blend the two colors together. You're not doing it like a traditional wet blend. You're not really trying to get it to blend completely 100%. Just sort of rubbing them together works. It really isn't that difficult. And then here we have the pure khaki, and that's going on the closest edges, or I should say the furthest from the center. You're starting to really just fill out at this point, make it as thick as you can. Not the paint, the line that you're painting. The paint should always be thin enough to flow smoothly. And then we only have one more layer after that, and that is khaki mixed with buff. I wouldn't go any lighter than this unless you started with a lighter color than this. The reason is later on we're going to wash this and it's going to darken down. But I think that if you were to put like a white variant, say ivory or off-white or eggshell or something like that, it would turn to a brown color quicker than ones that have their own color with them. So now we're going to let that dry completely, and we're moving back to our shield. And we're doing here a mixture of walnut and sandalwood. Just about a 50-50, oh my god, can't talk today, 50-50 mixture of the two colors, and just trying to get it in there in the middle. And then what we want to do is take some black leather. These are all from Scale 75. We're taking the black leather, and I thinned it down and then just real gently painted into those large cracks in the wood. You don't want to get this on the brown too much, but you're going to be covering it up anyway, so it's okay if it adds some shadow to the brown as well. Next up, we are going to start highlighting with a mixture of sandalwood, the sandalwood and walnut, but we're adding Iroko to that. Iroko is an even lighter color, so we're adding that to it. And as I have him lean back, the light is shining on it, and it's sort of just making it look like I'm putting water on. But as I lean him up, you can see now that there's a shadow from my hand over him, you can see that it's actually starting to look like wood. This one here, we now added birch to that mixture. So this is 4 colors mixed together. The reason is that you're just trying to blend it up nicely. And wood has so many like variations of color in it that you really can't go wrong. Do you need this many colors? No, you don't. Do you need to use these specific colors? Not at all. So then this one here is the pure birch. So this is just birch, and I'm using this to very lightly outline the edges. So I'm outlining the tops and bottoms of the wood, and then a little bit on the side. You can see it's very thin, and I don't have very much on my brush either because I want it to stay a very fine line. And then if any areas get a little bit too fat, you do a little bit too much, go back in there with your other mixtures and sort of build them back up. Well, there you go. It looks pretty good, I think. Definitely looks good in real life. So I think it looks good on camera there. Right now we're going to start working on the shield, and this uses this Mechanicus standard gray. And I'm only painting this on the bottom, we'll say 60 to 70%. Then on the top half, I'm using wolf gray. Mechanicus standard gray from GW, wolf gray from Vallejo. And where they meet, I'm going to wet blend. Now, a single layer does not do it. So I'm going to wet blend the first layer here. And so I'm going to wipe off my brush and then come back with a little bit of water on the tip of my brush and blend these two together. But that's not going to make a smooth blend. You're going to see that it looks like 3 specific colors. You're going to see a dark gray, a mid-tone gray, and then this white light gray. But then when we come back and I start doing the color over these colors, you'll see that they're blended. The reason is that I did this twice. So then I go back with the Mechanicus standard gray, put on another layer of the wolf gray, and then blend them. So there you can see there, it's much better blended. And now you're going to need at least 2 layers of flat green. A single layer you're going to be able to see as soon as I paint this on here. The bottom is very solidly colored. The top is not solidly colored at all. So you see that? You can see right through the green at the top. Now we want that effect, but it's going to look like brush strokes. So that's why you want to put on a second coat for sure. And as you can see here, I'm like figuring that out as I'm trying to move the paint around and realize I'm just literally moving paint around. Next up, I'm washing all of the fur with GW's Agrax Earthshade. Little behind the scenes secret here, I forgot to write down what paints I used, so as I'm rewatching the video here, I'm writing down the paints so that I can put the overlays up on the screen. But since I didn't do it while I was painting this guy, I have to do it now. And that's why I keep pausing after telling you what paint it is. Important part here is make sure you do not forget about the front, and also make sure you do not forget about those deep recesses next to his arms where there needs to be the deep shadows. If you forget those parts, they're going, like, once you start painting the arms, you're going to remember them and then have to do this all over again. Be very careful on the paw here. You don't want to get it on your nicely painted shield. Alright, after letting that dry, so I let the whole thing dry, you can see I've done the second coat of green on the shield. It's nice and solidly colored in, but you can also see that the top is light and the bottom is dark. So that effect happened perfectly. And now you're going to dry brush over the whole entire fur, one with flat brown, and then the second time with khaki. And you can see it's a very light dry brush. I'm not dry brushing heavy at all. This is just to bring out some of the tips and ensure that each piece of fur is not a solid color. You want them to be like natural fur. There's tons of variation, just like the natural wood. The more things that you have that are not metal or man-made or something like that, the more color variation there's going to be in it. And to make it look natural, you're going to have to do a ton of work blending colors together. So here I had a bright idea to work on this shield and put in the Brutes logo from the game. So I am using black ink. When I'm painting black as a freehand, I like to use ink because number one, it stays where you put it. Number two, it's very easy to work with in that it flows off the brush easily. And number three, it doesn't take 500 coats to cover something. So here you can see my camera is freaking out. It's like this weird wobbly color, but so all of the ink there, all I did was go back over those lines and fatten them. So I started with a very thin line and then I fattened it. Now I'm coming back with regular black from Vallejo model color and coloring in all the surrounding areas of the shield. So you can see around the outside of the shield, I based it in black. And now we are going to start on the skin tones. So this skin tone here is, what skin tone did I use there? This is Base Flesh from Nocturna. This is Base Flesh, which is a very dark orangish reddish flesh color. He's actually furry. He has a lot of fur on his skin. It's not a skin tone, but the color of the fur is sort of skin tone like. So I started with the Base Flesh, and that's multiple coats. It took multiple coats to get to there. And then I took the Base Flesh and I added some medium flesh to it. And I did multiple highlight passes. So this is the first highlight pass here. And I'm going in, and I'm sorry it's so blurry, but can't do anything about that now. I kept trying to get him in focus, and then I would lean him back to paint and he would go out of focus. And then I would bring him back up to check in the monitor and he would look fine, and then I lean him forward to paint again. So I didn't realize I was doing that. So now I can do that next time and make sure that he is correct. The cleaner you are with these highlights, the less work you have to do later fixing the lines of his muscles to make sure that he looks super buff. So here I'm kind of being a little sloppy, and I shouldn't have been. So here is now the fairy flesh has been added in. And the fairy flesh is going to bring it into a very pale highlight. Again, I'm doing multiple passes of each of these. So the very first one, while it's wet, it looks bright. Once it dries, it kind of dulls out, and then I wanted to go back on it again and do it again. One of the things I noticed is that his face is so contoured and bumpy that I was able to do sort of an overbrush on his face, and it actually worked pretty well to pick out the highlights rather than trying to do it with a standard, like just picking it out and painting it. Used Ivory here to do his fangs and his eyes, which are very easy to pick out on this model. So I left him just like that. I thought that was good enough. And then I'm also using, it's not also, we just started this. So Khaki. Took Khaki here, and I'm painting in the bones that are his chest armor. So he has 6 main bones that are his chest armor, and then he has some small ones that are sticking out from the side. So you want to make sure that you get all of those. And then also I'm painting the top half of each of the horns on his head, and then the back of his skull. making that look as if it was bone as well. So that's what it looks like all dried up. Now I'm coming in with Ivory again, and this Ivory is going to be to highlight up the bone armor, and then also on the top of his head, those bones are like covered in feathers. I don't know, it's kind of hard to see from the artwork exactly what's going on, but that sort of seems like what is happening. So I took the Ivory and did very quick brush strokes across the top of the horns in order to make them have like streaked highlighting and sort of make it look like there's feathers or maybe fur or something like that on the top of them. I'm also taking the Ivory and starting on the fur that is the 3 tails hanging from his waist. So I wanted them to look like foxtails. And the American or North American red fox has white tips on a red tail. And this was one of the things that I wanted to do differently from what is already on the model, because this will help break up some of this color. So this is whole red. We're going to be using this in 2 spots. The first spot is going to be to cover all of these tails, and you want to get them covered really, really well. This is going to be the base color for them. And if you do it quick enough, then you can blend it slightly with the white so that it's not so jarring, but you also don't want to create like a pink or something like that. So you don't want to mix them, but you do want to sort of overlap some spaces with them. And then once you're done with that, use the whole red to paint the back side of the horns. So this meets at the base of his skull, and I'm doing this on both sides, but I'm just going to show you one side. Well, I guess half of a side. And then here, I've now mixed in some flat orange into the whole red. And that flat orange, I'm doing the same thing that I did with the streaks of ivory on the top, and just sort of going through and adding a couple like scuff marks all around to, you know, add some texture and some variation in there. This is Scarlet red. And Scarlet red is being used on just the fronts, but covering pretty much everything of just the front of these tails. You don't want to do too much because you want to make sure that the shadows are showing through. And then here I've added some flat red. And this is going to be the highlight. Now you could push this highlight further if you really wanted to brighten it up by adding some orange to it and putting, you know, dry brushing that over it, or I guess you could, yeah, I think that would be really the only other thing that you would want to do if you went in this color spectrum, is add some orange and dry brush it. Here I'm using Mechanicus Standard Gray again, and that is to put a layer on the sword. So we're covering the sword completely. And I'm not going to try to do any sort of fancy non-metallic metal for this model. He's just sort of a game piece, and he's going to go back in the box as soon as he gets retired anyway. Since this game works on that sort of function, I'm not going to spend hours and hours and hours on the same model. So what I do want to do though is give it some character, because I do care about my paint jobs. So what I'm doing is I'm taking some black paint and I'm finding the creases that are on the blade that make it look all scuffed up and make it look like it's been used in battle. And then you do not want to use white here. White is too strong of a color, but any sort of off-white that you have, you'll drag this on the bottom half of the black. Now a good thing to do is if you put too much on, which I do on this center one, you see on the center one I'm going to push it a little too hard, so that's too thick. That's way too thick of a cut. I will come back and add a little bit more black back over top of it to thin that out. And then here we're using black on the bottom leggings, which are going to be like a wolf pelt style fur. So we're starting with black, and now you're not going to be able to see this because I decided to lean him so freaking far back that you can't see it until I turn him around. But I added some Mechanicus standard gray into the wolf black. What? Into the black. So that's a mixture there. And so there you can see it now. It's not super gray. We don't want to go too far into gray right at the beginning. We want to take that slowly and push that one step at a time. Here now we've put more Mechanicus, almost to pure Mechanicus. And that is going to be like a heavy overbrush. But now I put too much there. If you put too much on it like I did on that one, just start over. Best thing to do is just start over. That's what I did. So I didn't in this painting video, but you can see there it's much better now. So just start over, repaint the black, repaint the Mechanicus, and then do it again. If you mess up, it's the easiest way to do it. You don't need to strip the whole model for something so small like that. I mean, unless you're trying to do a painting competition, but then you're not watching this video for a painting competition. This is just to show you how to get him done and make him look as cool as possible. So first there was Khaki, and then some Ivory. So the Khaki to do the skulls, and then Ivory is going to highlight the skulls. You're going to paint a lot of it in Ivory, basically leaving just the bottom pieces and some in the center of the skull in the khaki color. And then we're coming here with some white mixed into the Ivory. I still don't use pure white. It's too bright. Pure white is too bright. But I mix some of the white into the Ivory there and really try to perk those up as much as possible. So it's about time that we get started on the leather, I believe. Let's see if I guessed correctly. Okay, I'm going to paint this forever, apparently. Alright, there we go. So leather, yes. The first thing that you want to do for the leather, this is a... this is another scale 75 brown leather. And I'm painting all of the leather with this. So he has 2 shoulder pads, 2 gloves, 2 shoes, his belt, and some hip pads on each side. So all of this is getting painted in this brown leather color. Then I'm coming back and I'm adding some orange leather into the brown leather. And that I'm going to paint the edges, so sort of like an edge highlight, but a little thicker than that. And then anywhere that the sun would be hitting, so the top portions, where you would normally highlight something, highlight that. So you want to do the top portions of all of the leather. As you can see here, I'm doing it on the glove. So I'm highlighting the edge there and then kind of getting all the other little areas around it that would be highlighted. So then I'm going to add some Iroko to the orange leather. And the Iroko is going to be kind of dabbed on, so what they call stippling. And I'm stippling that on a little bit heavier than you normally do because at this point I'm sort of over painting him. It's taking forever for, again, a model that is going to see I don't know how many games and then get put back in the box. And then finally here, I am in the mixture of the orange leather and Iroko, I added some birch in there. So with the birch in there, I am just highlighting some key points and edge highlighting. You also saw on my brush, I had way too much paint on there. So I clean off my brush and I put a new dab of paint on there and have much less, and it's much easier to work with. But I just go through and make sure that I hit all of the little places that I want to highlight with that. So now wrapping up the detail, we're adding in some bronze metallic here, and he has 3 chest pieces that need to be covered in bronze. He has 3 hip pieces that need to be covered in bronze. He has the outside of his shield, and he has the center of his shield that are all going to get painted, and I put multiple coats of that on. Because it does not cover very well. So it does take multiple coats to get it on. I would say 3 or 4 at minimum. But here he is. I think he turned out really, really well. I don't know. What do you think? You can see if I would have done everything exactly like the box art, he would have been really sort of boring. But I think that the green shield stands out, so you can see him on the board instantly. I like the copper look. It doesn't clash so much as like a gold would, but it's not as boring as silver. But thank you all so much for watching. New outro, I know. If you want to watch more in this series, click right here. If you would like to watch another video in a completely different series, click right here. And if you'd like an easy way to subscribe, other than clicking down below, even though it's right there and it says subscribe, you can click on this little picture right here. That also works.